When someone with an avoidant attachment style has decided they are done, the first thing you'll notice isn't necessarily a dramatic announcement or a clear conversation about where you stand. It's the quiet, almost invisible shrinking of their presence in your life. They don't suddenly disappear in one moment. Instead, their engagement with you starts to wither. Where they might have once been quick to reply, adding details, asking follow-up questions, and sharing parts of their own day, they now offer replies that feel like they could have been sent to anyone. A text that used to read like a window into their mind becomes a one-word acknowledgement. A phone call that once flowed effortlessly now feels like you're pulling teeth to keep it alive. You start to sense that you're the only one trying to keep the conversation going. It's not just the lack of length in their responses, it's the absence of warmth. The tone changes. The emotional energy is gone. They're no longer meeting you halfway, and they're barely meeting you at all. At first, you might tell yourself they're just busy. People go through stressful periods, and it's normal for communication to dip. But if you pay close attention, you'll see that busyness isn't the real reason. They still have energy for other things. They still show up for work. They still scroll on social media. They still interact with others. It's not that they've lost the ability to engage. It's that they're choosing not to engage with you. That choice might not be something they've consciously articulated to themselves, but it shows up in their behavior. It's the difference between a person who's temporarily distracted and a person who is emotionally checked out. When someone is still invested in a relationship, even during busy or stressful seasons, they find little ways to let you know you matter. They might send a quick, thoughtful message, or call you just to hear your voice, or leave you with a promise to connect properly when they can. An avoidant who has decided they're done doesn't do this. They strip communication down to the bare minimum necessary for politeness, and often even that politeness is inconsistent. You might send something heartfelt and get back a yeah or okay. You might share good news and get a thumbs up emoji. It's not about them suddenly being terrible at communication. It's about them no longer seeing value in giving you more. For you, this can feel deeply destabilizing because humans naturally seek reciprocity in connection. You offer your thoughts, your feelings, your presence, and you expect to feel some of that mirrored back. But when you're dealing with someone who's emotionally exiting, you'll find that mirror goes dark. They're no longer investing, and the silence between their words becomes louder than the words themselves. It starts to feel like every message you send is an intrusion, like you're interrupting something, like you're trying to hold on to someone who's already halfway out the door. This change is often subtle at first. One day you realize they've stopped asking you about your day. They no longer remember details about what's going on in your life. The "how are you" feels like a formality instead of genuine curiosity. If you try to bring up something emotional, they either brush past it quickly or give you vague, non-committal answers. It's not that they're too afraid to talk about feelings in general. It's that they're too detached from you to want to. The bond you had is no longer where they want to invest their emotional resources. What makes this especially confusing is that avoidants often believe they're doing you a kindness by fading out rather than having a direct conversation. They don't want to feel like the bad guy, so they disengage gradually, hoping you'll get the message. In their mind, reducing communication is a way of signaling without confrontation. But to you, it feels like being left in a fog where you can't quite see the edges of the relationship anymore. You start replaying past moments, wondering what changed, questioning whether you said or did something that pushed them away. But the truth is, when their responses shrink to short, cold, transactional replies, it's not about one conversation or one mistake. It's about them having already emotionally stepped back and begun the process of detaching completely. The words they send you now aren't bridges, they're just placeholders. They're a way of maintaining minimal contact while no longer giving you the intimacy, warmth, or connection that once made your exchanges feel alive. And the hardest part is realizing that this shift isn't temporary. It's not a bad day or a busy week. It's a sign they've moved on internally, even if they haven't physically disappeared from your life yet. When an avoidant has truly decided they're not coming back, one of the most obvious signs you'll see is their removal of you from their personal world. This isn't always done with a dramatic flourish or a clear announcement. In fact, many times it happens quietly, almost as if they're hoping you won't fully notice the shift until it's already done. One day you're connected to the small and large aspects of their life. You're in their social media circles, you share playlists, you've got access to photos, memories, maybe even shared digital spaces. And then suddenly, those doors start closing. They unfollow you, unfriend you, or block you. They might delete old photos of you together or change privacy settings so you no longer see their updates. It can feel like they're not just creating distance in the present, but rewriting the history you shared. This is a form of emotional and psychological separation. Avoidants, when they're detaching, don't like the constant reminder of connection. Seeing you in their feed, in their messages, or in their spaces feels too close for where they're trying to position themselves, which is far away, so they start to strip away those links, both to avoid triggering their own discomfort and to signal, consciously or not, that the chapter is over. If you've ever been through this, you know how jarring it can be. One day you're part of their online and offline life. The next you're on the outside looking in, wondering if the person you knew is still there at all. Sometimes this isn't just about digital removal. They might actively avoid physical spaces you used to share. Maybe you were both part of a certain friend group, and suddenly they stop showing up to gatherings where you'll be. Maybe they change routines so your paths don't cross. If you work together, they keep interactions strictly professional, cutting out any trace of personal warmth. It's not about convenience anymore. It's about creating intentional distance so they can move forward without you in the frame. For them, this feels like self-protection. For you, it feels like erasure. Because when someone removes you from their personal life, they're not just stepping away from current interactions. They're cutting off the avenues through which reconnection might happen. When you no longer have casual, low-pressure points of contact, the ability to rebuild or re-engage becomes almost non-existent. Avoidants know this, consciously or unconsciously. By reducing access, they reduce the possibility of being pulled back into intimacy or obligation. And the way they do it can be especially telling. If this removal comes without explanation, without a conversation, it sends an even louder message. There's no attempt to leave a bridge for later. There's no, I just need some time, or let's keep some distance. It's a clean, quiet severing. Even if you try to initiate contact through other channels, you'll notice the resistance. The wall isn't just in one place, it's everywhere. The boundaries they put up are designed to stop you from stepping back into their world in any meaningful way. In some cases, they might disguise this removal as something else. They'll say they're taking a break from social media or just too busy, when in reality, you can see that their interactions with others remain intact. They're still active, they're still sharing, they're still engaging, just not with you. That selective disengagement is one of the clearest signs they're not leaving the door open. Because when someone still cares about keeping you in their orbit, even loosely, they don't go to the effort of dismantling the shared connections that link you together. What makes this stage so emotionally heavy is that it confirms in a tangible way what might have only been a feeling before. You can sense when someone is pulling away, but seeing your name disappear from their followers list, or noticing that they've removed the pictures you thought were special, hits differently. It turns an emotional distance into something visible and measurable. And once that removal has happened, it's rarely something they reverse. Avoidants, especially when firm in their decision, see this step as final. They're not just removing you from view. They're removing the temptation to re-engage, both for themselves and for you. It's also worth noting that this isn't always done in anger. In fact, many avoidants take these actions from a place of wanting a clean break, even if they can't or won't explain it to you directly. To them, keeping you in their personal spaces feels messy, like it leaves too many loose threads. So they tie them off in the most definitive way they know, by making sure you're no longer present in the spaces that matter to them. Once this happens, the dynamic between you changes entirely. You're no longer updated on their life unless you actively seek the information elsewhere. You're not part of their day-to-day awareness. The flow of casual connection that once made your relationship feel natural and alive is gone, replaced with an intentional absence. And because avoidants often see reconnection as a threat to the separation they've worked to create, the act of removing you is as much about preventing their own backslide as it is about keeping you at a distance. When an avoidant has crossed the line into truly being done, one of the clearest shifts you'll feel is the complete absence of curiosity about you and your life. Curiosity is one of the most telling signs of emotional investment. When someone cares, they want to know how you're doing, what's been happening for you, what's on your mind. They remember the details you share, they follow up on past conversations, and they make you feel seen because they are engaged in your world. When that curiosity disappears, it's like a quiet but powerful signal that they have emotionally stepped away. You might share something that once would have sparked interest, and now it barely gets a reaction. Where they once asked questions and leaned in to hear more, they now respond in ways that close the door rather than open it. At first, you may try to justify it. You might tell yourself they're distracted, stressed, or just not in the mood for conversation. But over time, you begin to notice a pattern. No matter what you share, it doesn't land. If you tell them about something exciting that happened, they might give a brief acknowledgement and then shift the topic back to themselves or something impersonal. If you talk about a challenge you're facing, they might brush past it without offering empathy or follow-up. Even your victories, the moments you'd expect someone to celebrate with you, are met with indifference. It's not just that they don't have questions, it's that they don't seem to care enough to want the answers. This loss of curiosity is a subtle but devastating change in the dynamic. Relationships thrive on a mutual exchange of attention. When someone is genuinely invested, they want to stay connected to the evolving story of your life. They want to be part of the details, what you're working on, who you've been spending time with, how you've been feeling lately. Without that, you stop feeling like a priority and start feeling like an afterthought. And when it's an avoidant making this shift, it's often intentional. Curiosity requires emotional involvement, and emotional involvement is exactly what they're trying to avoid once they've decided they're finished. You'll notice they stop remembering important things you've told them. Maybe you mentioned an upcoming trip, a presentation, or a family event, something that mattered to you. And when it comes up again, they act as though they're hearing about it for the first time. In the past, they might have followed up, asked how it went, or shown excitement for you. Now there's nothing. This lack of recall isn't necessarily because they can't remember. It's because they aren't attaching value to the information anymore. They're not storing it the way you do for people you care about, because they've mentally shifted you out of that category. Even in casual conversation, you can feel the gap. You might notice that you're the one always initiating topics, always trying to keep the dialogue alive while they contribute less and less. Their responses feel mechanical, as though they're speaking out of obligation rather than genuine interest. This imbalance leaves you drained because you're carrying the weight of connection on your own. It's not just a communication issue, it's an emotional one. Without curiosity, there's no drive to deepen or maintain the bond. Sometimes this lack of curiosity extends into a sort of passive disconnection where they not only avoid asking about your life, but actively redirect attention away from it. If you start talking about something meaningful, they might change the subject, joke to deflect, or respond with something so minimal it shuts the conversation down. It's a way of creating distance without having to outright say they're done. For them, engaging with you on a personal level could invite closeness they no longer want, so they simply remove that pathway altogether. It's important to understand that curiosity isn't just about words, it's about presence. Even in silence, you can feel when someone is tuned in to you, watching your reactions, listening for meaning in what you say. When that's gone, you feel it. They might still be physically around or technically responding to you, but the mental and emotional presence is missing. Their attention wanders, their body language closes off, and you get the sense that they'd rather be anywhere else. This absence of curiosity is one of the strongest indicators that their attachment to you has dissolved, because curiosity is driven by care. And when the care is gone, the desire to know you disappears with it. When an avoidant reaches the point where they have emotionally checked out, you'll see it in how they change the way they connect with you. The depth that was once there is replaced with something surface level, something polite but hollow, like they're maintaining the bare appearance of civility without any of the substance. They stop engaging in the kind of conversations that bring you closer and instead keep everything light, factual, and emotionally neutral. It's as if they've decided that the safest way to interact is to make sure nothing they say could possibly pull them back into intimacy. Where there were once moments of vulnerability, laughter that came from a shared understanding, or long talks that stretched into the night, now there's small talk, perfunctory responses, and interactions that could just as easily be with a stranger. It often starts with subtle shifts. You might reach out to share something personal or meaningful, and they acknowledge it in the quickest way possible without inviting more depth. They'll give you a short answer, change the subject, or respond in a way that makes it clear they're not interested in unpacking what you just said. If you try to probe further, they keep their guard up and steer the conversation towards something safer. Their words feel like they're wrapped in a protective layer, deliberately avoiding anything that could lead to emotional closeness. Even in person, the energy changes. You might notice that their eye contact is shorter, their body language is more closed, and the little gestures of warmth that used to be second nature, leaning in, smiling at shared jokes, mirroring your expressions, are no longer there. The atmosphere between you shifts from connection to formality. You could be talking about the weather, the traffic, or work deadlines, and the exchange would feel the same as it does now when you bring up something from your heart. That sameness is what's so striking. It's all surface all the time. This is a form of emotional self-protection for an avoidant. By stripping away depth, they limit opportunities for connection, which in turn makes it easier for them to stay disconnected. Depth invites vulnerability, and vulnerability invites the possibility of being drawn back into something they've already decided to leave behind. So they keep it shallow on purpose. It's not that they've suddenly lost the ability to have meaningful conversations. It's that they've decided not to have them with you. They can still be warm and engaging with others. But with you, they've switched into a different mode, one that creates a buffer between you and the parts of them you once knew. You'll often feel this in the tone of their voice. It becomes more neutral, less infused with the warmth or playfulness you used to hear. Even when they respond positively, it's muted, almost as though they're performing politeness rather than actually feeling engaged. And when they're not feeling engaged, they're not leaving any openings for you to step closer. Conversations become a series of short, closed loops rather than an open road you can both travel down together. What makes this stage so frustrating is that it can sometimes feel more confusing than outright silence. If someone ignores you completely, the message is clearer. But when they keep things polite, you can find yourself questioning whether they're truly done or just going through something. You start to wonder if maybe this is temporary, if maybe you can find the right way to break through and get them to open up again. But what's really happening is that they've already decided to remove emotional intimacy from the equation, and the polite, surface-level exchanges are their way of keeping a wall up without fully closing the door in a way that feels confrontational. This also affects the rhythm of your interactions. Moments that used to feel natural now feel like you're walking on eggshells, careful not to overstep or push for more than they're willing to give. You start to censor yourself, editing out the deeper things you want to share because you can feel they won't be received. The result is that you both begin to exist in a watered-down version of your connection, where the meaningful parts are missing and all that's left is a shell. That shell might look intact from the outside, but inside it's hollow, and you can feel the emptiness every time you interact. Over time, you begin to notice that these surface-level exchanges aren't just a phase. They've become the new normal. They're not a bridge to something deeper. They're a replacement for it. The avoidant is signaling, without saying it outright, that they no longer see you as someone to share their inner world with. And once that shift has happened, it's incredibly rare for them to move back into depth, because doing so would mean reopening themselves to a connection they've already decided to leave behind. When an avoidant has mentally and emotionally exited the relationship, one of the strongest signs you'll see is that they start building their emotional home somewhere else. This doesn't always mean they're jumping into a new romantic relationship right away, although that can happen. More often, it means they begin directing their time, energy, and emotional availability toward other people, places, or pursuits in a way that leaves no room for you. the investment that once went into your connection gets rerouted. You'll see them becoming more engaged with friends they hadn't been close to in a while, joining new social circles, throwing themselves into work, or picking up hobbies and activities that consume their focus. From the outside, it can even look like they're thriving, but what's really happening is that they're relocating their sense of belonging away from you. This shift can be subtle at first. They might casually mention new people they've been spending time with, or you'll notice them posting photos and updates that include others, but not you. When you ask about their day, the stories they tell are filled with experiences you weren't part of. They're building a life in which you no longer play a central role, and they're doing it in a way that makes it harder and harder for you to fit back in. It's not just about who they're seeing, it's about where they're pouring their emotional attention. The conversations that once happened with you are now happening with someone else. The emotional support they used to seek from you is now being sourced elsewhere. Avoidants tend to be deliberate about this redirection. Once they've decided to step back from a relationship, they don't want to leave themselves open to being drawn back in. Creating new emotional anchors is their way of reinforcing the separation. They might start talking more about how much they enjoy their independence or how refreshing it is to meet new people who just get them without the complications they felt with you. Even if they don't say these things outright, their actions tell the story. They're scheduling their time differently. They're unavailable when you reach out. And when they do respond, it's clear they're already mentally somewhere else. You might also notice that they seem energized by these new connections in a way they no longer are with you. The enthusiasm they show for making plans, engaging in conversations, or sharing parts of their life is reserved for others. With you, everything feels muted and minimal. This contrast can be painful because it's not that they've lost the capacity for connection, they've just chosen to channel it away from you. It becomes obvious that the space you once occupied in their emotional world has been filled. In some cases, they'll even seek out people or environments that are the complete opposite of what they had with you. This isn't always because they were unhappy, but because it reinforces the psychological break. If you represented depth and emotional vulnerability, they might gravitate toward lighter, less demanding interactions. If you shared certain routines or communities, they might intentionally avoid those and immerse themselves in new ones. It's a way of rewriting their daily life, so it no longer includes the reminders of your presence. What makes this behavior so telling is that it's active, not passive. There's a difference between simply drifting into other connections and intentionally establishing new emotional bonds that replace the old ones. Avoidants who are truly done aren't just filling time, they're constructing a support system and sense of belonging that makes returning to you less and less appealing. Over time, this new network becomes their emotional default, the place they go for comfort, validation, and companionship. You may also find that when you do try to connect, you're met with subtle signals that you're no longer part of their inner circle. They might share things with you after the fact, or you hear about them from someone else instead of directly. The priority has shifted. Where they once might have thought of you first, now you're an afterthought, if you're considered at all. And as those new emotional bonds deepen, the gap between you grows wider, making it clear that their attachment has been redirected in a way that leaves little to no room for you to step back in. When an avoidant has made the decision not to return, one of the most telling behaviors you'll notice is that they begin to rewrite the narrative of your relationship. This isn't always an intentional act of malice. In many cases, it's a psychological mechanism that helps them justify their decision to detach. In order to feel comfortable with leaving, they start reframing the story of what you had together in a way that makes it seem less significant or less meaningful than it once was. They might downplay the depth of your connection, minimize the good times you shared, or focus almost exclusively on the parts of the relationship that were challenging. By doing this, they create a mental version of the past that supports their present choice to walk away. At first, you might hear small shifts in how they describe things. Maybe they used to talk about certain moments as special or important, but now they refer to them casually, as if they were just ordinary events. They might dismiss memories that were meaningful to you by saying they don't really remember them or implying they weren't as big a deal as you thought. Over time, these subtle changes can build into a completely different picture of your history together, one where the closeness you felt seems invisible or irrelevant in their retelling. This rewriting often extends to how they talk about the relationship to others. Friends or mutual connections might notice the shift too. Where they once spoke with warmth or pride about being with you, now their tone is neutral or even critical. They may highlight disagreements, incompatibilities, or moments of distance, using those as the defining features of your time together. In doing so, they make it easier for themselves to see the breakup as inevitable, even if the relationship was once filled with connection and joy. For the person on the receiving end, this can be deeply disorienting. You start to question your own memories, wondering if you've misinterpreted the closeness you thought was there. But what's really happening is that the avoidant is selectively focusing on certain aspects of the past to align with the emotional distance they now feel. It's not that the good times never happened, it's that they no longer want to hold on to them. Good memories can create an emotional pull, and for someone who's determined to stay away, that pull feels like a threat to their decision. Sometimes this rewriting comes across in more direct statements. They might say they never felt as connected as you did, or that they always had doubts about the relationship, even if that contradicts things they once said or did. They may frame themselves as never having been fully invested or suggest that the relationship was always flawed beyond repair. While these statements may sting, they're often less about reflecting objective truth and more about creating an internal narrative that keeps them from questioning their choice. This process of reframing can also involve redefining their own role in the relationship. They might position themselves as someone who was just going along with things, or as someone who stayed too long out of obligation. They might shift responsibility for the ending entirely onto you, portraying themselves as someone who had no choice but to step away. By adjusting the story in this way, they reduce feelings of guilt or conflict, allowing them to maintain the emotional separation they've created. The more they retell this new version of events, both to themselves and to others, the more solid it becomes in their mind. Over time, it's not just a narrative they use to justify the breakup, it becomes the lens through which they remember the entire relationship. This is why conversations with them about the past can feel so frustrating. You might recall moments of connection, growth, or mutual care, while they recall only the instances that support their decision to leave. It's not that they've forgotten everything else. It's that they've consciously or unconsciously decided those parts don't serve the story they need to believe right now. This rewriting of the relationship serves a very specific function for the avoidant. It ensures that their emotional door stays shut. If they allowed themselves to remember the relationship in its fullness, with all its highs as well as its lows, they might feel conflicted, nostalgic, or tempted to reconsider. By narrowing their focus to the challenges and downplaying the value of the connection, they make it easier to hold their ground and avoid being pulled back in. The result is a version of history that feels foreign to you but fits perfectly with the distance they're determined to maintain.